Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today, part two, the final part of my complete George Perez Wonder Woman run. In the first part, we did issues 1 to 20 and annual number 1. Today, we're starting with issue 21. We're going through the end of the run, which is issue 62. We'll also have annual 2 in there as well. And I'm going to be going into less detail here than I did with the first 20 issues, and that's partially because I actually never finished reading all of these. I only got up to about issue 38, and I sort of tailed off, and I never got back to reading the rest of it. So I know that this is going to be blasphemy for some of you, but I wanted to show you the comics. I'll show you the covers. I'll talk a little bit about the story and sort of why I sort of trailed off. But let's just get right into it. So, 21. Still some amazing Perez covers going on here. At this point, it's Perez writing, Perez drawing, different inkers coming in. This is Bob McLeod. 22. Now, I mentioned before, I got almost the entire run out of... I got like the first 25 issues, other than this one, at a yard sale for 25 cents each, and then the rest of them I got out of 50-cent bins and dollar bins. I only had to buy like 2 of these as actual back issues, and this is one of them. For whatever reason, the guy got this at the yard sale was missing this issue. Some of these covers are very like modern in the sense that it's like doesn't really tell you anything about what's going on in the story. It's just a really cool like portrait. One thing that Perez does a few times here is he just shows Diana being like happy, and like having the positive personality that she does. It's very, and that's not very modern, because that's the sort of thing where, you know, you would definitely these days she would have to be like, you know, holding up a severed head or something. But back in the day, it was okay for people to be like heroes and be positive. So great cover there. 23. Now this is really important. It's this guy. Yes, it's Hermes. So Hermes takes up an increasingly large part of the story. Starting with this issue, the gods start getting more and more involved in the affairs of mortals, and particularly with Diana, and that starts here, and that coincides with me starting to enjoy the series a little bit less. 24, very minor note, but you'll see up here in the corner box now it says number 24. Don't know why they decided to do that. It was only for a couple issues, but there's number 24. Here's number 25. We got an invasion crossover. So, even this is cover dated. Strange, there's no cover date. Odd. Both of these ones that say number on them don't have any cover date. Wow, it's really interesting. So let me back up and show you this. Maybe it's not interesting. Maybe this is dumb. But this is the kind of minutia that you're not going to get at anyone else's channel, because no one else would be as boring to talk about this. Issue 23 is cover dated, as you can see there, or as you can't see there because it's out of focus, but take my word for it, it's cover dated December 1988. Then we have number 24, which has no cover date. 25, which has no cover date. And then 26, which is cover dated January of 89. So it's interesting because these 2 issues with no cover date that say number on them seem to have come out in between issues. Like, let me take a look at the indicia and see if, okay, indicia, Wonder Woman 23. It actually doesn't have the date. Interesting. The indicia is not going to help us here. So I don't know what that's about, but we have more invasion here. So even in the end of 1988 and going into 1989, we're already at the point in comics where these big event stories are interrupting the run. I mean, we saw a little bit of that with the Legends crossover, and Perez sort of sidestepped it with his weird issue that was filled with like letters and stuff, where he just sort of like filled everyone in on the important stuff and used it as a character building thing, right? As a way to spotlight the characters, which is a great way to do it. But here it's just sort of like right in the middle of whatever he's doing, it gets interrupted by this stupid invasion storyline. 27. This is cool. It gets back to the Steve Trevor stuff. There's Steve Trevor and Etta Candy, who in this continuity are in a relationship, and they've been brought to Paradise Island to see the statue of Steve Trevor's mother that is there as a tribute to her. So that's a really cool cover. The lighting is amazing. '28. Okay, here was where we finally get into the storyline that pays off the stuff with Cheetah. Here's Cheetah. This cover is a struggle for me. I'm colorblind. This one's tough. I can see that Cheetah is here, but it's really difficult for me to see that. I don't know if it's easier for other people or not, but for me, it's very hard. Some great covers. Here's another great cover, 31. More stuff with Cheetah. That's a really cool cover. '32. Guest artists, Tom Grummett. '33. I'm gonna have a guest artist here as well. Yeah. Guest artist here, Chris Marinan, issue 33. Now, you can see we've got some guest artists coming in. Perez still doing the covers, not doing the interiors of these. And then after that issue, we get Annual 2. And when we come back from Annual 2, those guest artists have now become the regular artists. So Perez is no longer drawing the series. We get 34. So Chris Marinan is now on the series. So this coincides with about the point where I stopped reading it. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I'm not really an art snob. A lot of times I don't even notice the art so much. Obviously, George Perez is amazing. So when you're going from George Perez drawing to anyone else drawing, there's going to be a drop off. In particular with this series, because it's so personal for George Perez, and it's not necessarily as personal for the other ones. It's missing a little bit something, but also there's points in these comics where I feel a disconnect between the writer and the artist. There's places where I feel like Perez is trying to get one thing across and the art is not necessarily on the same page. And I don't know how much of that is to do with like the artists not being able to execute Perez's vision. How much of it is maybe Perez, he up to this point he's been writing for himself and he is primarily an artist. I don't know how much of that is maybe Perez not knowing how to write for someone else to explain his thing. I don't know. Maybe he was great at it and the artist just couldn't manage it. And the art's okay. I'm not dumping on the artist, but it didn't feel like when Perez is writing and drawing it, there's a unified feeling to everything. And now we're losing that. They're sort of on separate wavelengths a little bit. Now, this story is still pretty interesting because it introduces another group of Amazons who have a very different sort of like um, thought process or culture that they've created than the people on Paradise Island. And so there's sort of like not an evil Wonder Woman, but like a dark Wonder Woman. Um, and you get into that story, and that's interesting, and it becomes very important later on, I guess. I didn't read later on. We're starting to get into covers where they're not even actually Perez covers. Now, it still looks a lot like Perez, but if you look at the credits, it's Marinan and Perez. So I think what's happening here is that Chris Marinan is doing the line work, and then Perez is inking it, so he's making it look like a Perez drawing. It's hard to say because they look very Perez, but they all say Marinan and Perez, so I'm not sure which is going first. But I have a feeling it's Perez doing heavy inking over Marinan pencils so that the end result looks like Perez. There's still some really good covers. And this was the last issue that I did. So there was some kind of storyline in here where they end up bringing a bunch of people to Paradise Island from the outside world, and there's some kind of strife, and we started to get into the stuff where like the Amazons maybe, I forget exactly, but like, you know, it says trouble in paradise, so it's like there's like there's a type of story with superhero comics that happens several times in Avengers, where it's like this sort of glorious Godfrey thing from Legends, where it's basically the heroes are being discredited and public opinion turns against them, and it causes a lot of strife. And I really don't like those stories. And there's elements of that here. So this is basically where I stopped reading. So I haven't really read most of these. I've skimmed some of them. But 40? There's just also a lot of stuff with Hermes and that I'm not interested in, and etc., etc. 41. So I know that there's people that watch these that are really big Wonder Woman fans who have read all of these, and you're probably screaming at your screen right now at the idea that I have all of these George Perez Wonder Woman issues that I haven't actually read. There's like 20 issues that I haven't read. I can see that Mindy Newell is on a scripter, which is interesting. She did write the last pre-crisis, the last like 2 or 3 issues she came on for that. And she did some Lois Lane stuff. It's always good to have female creators working on Wonder Woman. Starting at 45, we get back to having George Perez covers, which is great because he's great. And they also go with this issue just for a couple issues to this logo, which we've seen before, but it's a very minimalist, small version. Here's a very special issue about suicide, which is interesting. It's by Perez, and he's done his usual Perez line work there. But then in the behind it is something that I think is almost intentionally done to look sort of like a crayon drawing. 47, you can see a team up with Wonder Girl, who they're calling Troya, and who they've given this just ugly costume. Perez loves his fiddly details, and he sometimes, I don't know if he designed that costume or not, but he frequently designs ugly costumes because he likes to draw all this stuff on them. 48, it's one of these kind of covers, which are always cool. 49, it says, "I look back and wonder the story so far." Has a great cover by Perez. Great cover. It's also interesting that it's written by Perez, but it's drawn by Colleen Duran. We're going to be seeing more, I think, of her. Well, maybe not. But anyway, issue 50. So here's one of the other ones that I actually bought as a back issue. It has a tremendous cover by Perez. You can see my copy is also signed. I'm pretty sure it's signed by Jill Thompson, who does some of the art. You can see there's a bunch of artists that do like pinups and like stuff. But I think that Jill Thompson's the primary artist on this issue. Amazing cover. Some great covers here. So we're getting into an era where there are these Perez covers, and he's still writing, but these are now Jill Thompson's doing a couple issues of the interior. You see, we're still dealing with Lord Hermes. It's been like 25 issues now. Cynthia Martin on the art for this issue, which is interesting. I know her from Star Wars. I've had some serious arguments because I'm a big fan of actually her work on Star Wars, and other people seem to hate it. 53, Jill Thompson again. And at this point, we're getting towards the end of his run. So they're starting to really tie up a lot of the, from what I've skimmed, starting to really tie up a lot of the stuff with the mythology. Although the next issue has the character who went on later to become a much more prominent Wonder Woman villain. Dr. Psycho, who was a character in Pre-Crisis as well. And this is the first time in Wonder Woman that we've seen him post-Crisis. And this is part of a storyline. Classic Wanted poster. There's some couple classic Wanted poster covers with Wonder Woman from Pre-Crisis as well. Jill Thompson is the regular artist on all of these. 58. 59. And now we get a War of the Gods has begun here. This is part 2 of War of the Gods, right? So we've got this big storyline, which Wonder Woman is obviously central to. Here she is with Batman. This is kind of embarrassing to see Lobo on a Wonder Woman cover. You can kind of see, I don't know. I'm just guessing that that's not quite the direction Perez wanted to go with this. 61, the last War of the Gods issue here for Wonder Woman. And then and let me back up just a little bit. 61 is actually a Jill Thompson cover. So Perez has done all the covers to this point. He had that run where he was inking, but this is like the first one someone else is drawing, and then it's Jill Thompson, and she also does issue 62 where she's leaving Paradise Island. It's basically resetting the status quo, setting up a new status quo for the new writer. It comes in after issue 62. The next issue is issue 0, because they did this like 0 hour thing where they had all these 0 issues, and a lot of them were like first issues or first like resetting the status quo issues. And so that was sort of across the line. There's a lot of different runs that ended here, and new creators come in. So it's like Perez is leaving, but at the same time, it's when Grell left. I think it's when Grell left Green Arrow. I might have that wrong. He might have left already. But anyway, Green Arrow 0 is the first Connor Hawke Green Arrow, stuff like that. They have the Starman 0. Like they have all these 0 issues that are sort of either rebooting the direction of the series, or launching new titles. So that takes place, and then after that, we get the new writer goes in a completely different direction and immediately takes Wonder Woman into space, where because she becomes a space pirate, which I do appreciate the complete change of direction. So I don't know, maybe at some point I'll read the rest of these issues. They just got kind of bogged down a little bit for me. The material, a lot of the mythology started to become heavier and heavier. I wasn't quite landing as well when Perez stopped doing the art for me. And yeah, it just, I don't know. I lost my momentum on it. I like to read several issues in a row. So just sit down and read a stack at once. And it just sort of burnt me out a little bit, and I've never gone back to it. It's been probably 10 years since I got to like issue 38 and stopped. But there it is. There you have it. I know that some of you have read these, and I'd love you to comment down below on what your thoughts on them. Particularly interested, I guess, in the Jill Thompson issues, because I have a feeling that she maybe landed some of these stories a little better than some of the artists that he was working with previously. Again, the art was fine. I just felt like there was a disconnect with the writing. So I'm curious to hear about that. So if you have any thoughts about the later half of the Perez run, please let me know. But I wanted to show off all the cool covers and just the whole series. So thanks very much for watching. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I'll see you next time.